Hi, I'm Bobby Albert with Lead to Grow podcast, and today we have a great guest today. It's Doug Fagerstrom, and he's with Marketplace Chaplains. Doug, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your background and a little bit about Marketplace Chaplains?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Bobby. It's good to be with you today. It all probably goes way back for me, but a number of years ago, got involved in church ministries, served in 4 churches up in the Midwest area of our nation, and from there went to lead a seminary up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. From there, our journey brought us down to Orlando, Florida, where we were able to provide leadership for a church planting organization called Converge Worldwide. We'd plant about 80 churches a year in the U.S. and then touched about 31 different countries with church planting. And then one of my friends, Price Harding from Carter Baldwin, called and said, "Hey, Doug, organization called Marketplace Chaplains is looking for a new president. We thought of you." And I said, "Why me?" And he simply read the 8 bullet points of what they were looking for, and my only response was, "You just read the last 35 years of my life almost chronologically." And it was something we deeply thought about, we prayed about, and long story short, that led us all the way to Dallas, Texas, up in Plano where our offices are, and now leading a dynamic, fast-growing ministry of chaplains in the workplace.
Yeah, would you mind kind of sharing a little bit more of the background or what Marketplace Chaplains, what they do in the workplace?
Well, we simply place chaplains in a workplace environment where a company owner desires to provide exceptional employee care. One HR director said, "You guys kind of pick up where HR leaves off as far as that personal touch and high touch of what employees deal with from day to day, which they all bring into the workplace." And our chaplains are well trained to listen, to care, to have the kind of dialogue that is incredibly helpful to the employees. And it can be everything from family to finances to job issues to relationship issues to what the latest crisis is at home, to the point where a chaplain, because they're available 24/7, will get a call at 2 a.m. From an employee saying, "Hey, I'm down at Baylor Hospital. Chaplain, can you come on down here?" And the chaplain will be there within an hour is our expectation, just to provide that personal comfort and care to a person who's going through, at that moment, a crisis in their life. And so our chaplains are available in 47 states. We're growing up in Canada, Mexico, and we're just delighted for the opportunity to serve about 190,000 employees across our nation.
Yeah, I've been impressed to watch the growth of Marketplace Chaplains. And, you know, I myself, prior to January of 1997, which is a long time ago, employees were coming to me seeking counseling. And so I was getting way over my head, and I went to my pastor and asked him, "Is there any way I could hire one of the other ministers here at the church to come at our workplace? Because I'm getting over my head with." At that time, we had an employee, a lady whose husband was a police officer, and he was physically abusing her. There was a lady that we hired. We didn't know till later on that the reason why she moved to our city was because when she was in another state, she was raped, and she was having struggles with that. And, you know, we had employees dealing with financial issues and other, problems in their lives and things like that. So I was just getting way over my head. So my pastor said, "Well, I know a guy named Gil Strickland, and he has a place called Marketplace Chaplains, and you need to talk to him." So Gil came in, And we talked to him, and we signed up, and we started on January 1st of 1997. One of the things that I think that really attracted us is the, everything the employees talk to the chaplain that comes into the workplace every week. It was all kept confidential. Mm-hmm. I had no idea, what the employees were talking to the chaplain about. And I like that. I mean, be honest with you, I really didn't want to know, because these people were telling me things like, as the boss, oh my goodness, I'm hearing things that I really, I don't know. It's just like, I don't need to hear these things, and they were trusting me to, ask for advice and help. So
I really applaud you as an employer that you had the kind of culture that was that open, and employees felt the freedom and opportunity to come into your open door and share with you. That isn't the case in most situations. And what you are overwhelmed with, can you imagine how many employees were scared to death to come in and talk to you?
Yeah.
Things going on in their life that might have been an HR violation, might have been things that would have cost them their job. And that happens every day in every workplace. And now we have chaplains there that the employees can at least download what they're going through with a chaplain who maintains extreme confidentiality. The employer will never know what's going on at that level or who the chaplain is talking to. And then the chaplain has an opportunity to help the employee work through those things for a better employee. But ultimately, it even leads to a better ROI in that company. You got better morale, better employee health, just a better workplace overall is what we find to be some of the results.
Yeah, I saw with my own eyes, our employees had a real strong sense that, especially the boss, being Bobby Albert, really cared for me because of, I think they knew it, but they knew that when we provided the marketplace chaplains services, is they knew that Bobby really, really cared for me as a person. And I heard stories, and I only know these because the employees shared them, not because of a chaplain shared it, but I know that there was a lady and her boyfriend. They were living together, and he was about to commit suicide. And the chaplain got a call like at something like 2 o'clock in the morning and talked him off of the ledge, from the building, and saved his life. Several times I had employees that have come to me, later on and said, this has saved my marriage. But I personally saw as well, our company, we had a moving company, and we had a truck accident once, and there were 3 employees. 2 of them died in that truck accident, and one of them got severely injured. He eventually recovered from that. But the chaplain being on site immediately when we brought all the employees together the next morning, and talking with employees, being with them because they were grieving. They were, these are some of their best friends. They knew them well. It was a challenging time for our company, but it was amazing. I'm really shocked that our company, through all of that, is how close our employees came together. And I really think it had to do with the chaplain and him ministering to the parents, because these were single guys, and or 2 of them were, and one of them was married. Just ministering to that wife and to the parents of those, some of those guys is. It was amazing. And I tell you, one thing is a testament here is through all of that that challenge, our company never got sued over what took place.
That's right. In 33 years, we have not had lawsuits that have brought us all into the courtroom. You know, we have a First Amendment that protects this opportunity to be able to openly share with people, and a lot of folks don't realize that. But it is so good. You know, you talk about the crisis of a truck accident, and horrific as that is. Our chaplains have recently been down in Houston through the flooding, what Hurricane Harvey brought and how it devastated so many families. 127 chaplains in the Houston area. We have chaplains in Puerto Rico, and they were there for 37 families who lost their homes. They lost everything. And the chaplains have been available to them and providing hope and care and compassion and help where needed. We were over in Las Vegas after that horrible mass killing down in Sutherland Springs, Texas, where a church was just devastated by a gunman. And so those are probably some of the tips of the spear of where chaplains end up going. And then I shadow a chaplain once a month. They call me undercover boss. And so, no, I don't put a wig and a mustache on, but I do get to go in and see firsthand what our chaplains are doing, because I think it's important for me, if I'm going to help provide some leadership, that I know what's going on as far as our boots on the ground. And I won't forget, long ago I was walking through a manufacturing plant here in the Dallas area, and I was walking with a chaplain, and a high-low goes by and screeches to a stop and squeals to back up. I didn't know high-lows could squeal their tires, but they do. And the high-low driver jumps off the high-low after he stops it, and he runs over to the chaplain standing next to me, picks him up about 3 inches off the ground, and says, "Chaplain, thanks." And the chaplain said, "Thanks for what?" And he said, "Well, thanks for what you told me 2 months ago." And the chaplain said, "What did I tell you 2 months ago?" And obviously our chaplains are meeting with scores of people on a regular basis. He said, "Well, you don't remember?" He said, "No, what did I say?" He said, "Well, you told me to go home and be nice to my wife." and while we can find that as a point of humor, the other side of it is no one had ever told this adult man, "You ought to be nice to your wife." It wasn't modeled for him. Nobody ever told him that. But the chaplain had listened to him and listened to the situation at home, said, "Go home, be nice to your wife." And the guy says, "Hey, chaplain, it works." and he was so excited about that. And then the chaplain said, "Well, what else can I do for you?" He said, "Well, pray for my mom. She's having surgery next week." And he said, "What's her name?" And the chaplain took out a little 3x5 card, started writing it down, and he said, "Well, where's she having surgery?" And the gentleman here in Dallas said, "Oh, don't worry about it. She's up in Cincinnati." He said, No. What hospital?" He told her. He said, "When surgery?" "Next Tuesday, 7:30 in the morning." He said, "Don't worry about it. We'll have one of our chaplains there with your mom before she goes in for surgery." So it's exciting to be able to provide that kind of care, not only to the employees and the companies we serve, but to their families and their extended families. We recently had an employee call one of the chaplains and said, "Hey, could you come over and help me resolve a dispute with my neighbor?" And the chaplain came over and was able to provide the calm reason that these two men could not arrive at. And the stories go on and on and on of what chaplain care is all about.
You know, Doug, you made me think of some other things that we were doing in our company. What Marketplace Chaplain was doing in our workplace, it was going on so well. We started thinking, is there a way that we could provide this service? We would pay the expense with our customers and our suppliers. And what we didn't exercise the option very often, but about 99% of our business was outside of my hometown, which is Wichita Falls, Texas. And we were moving people like from California to Illinois, from Florida to Virginia, from the state of Washington to the state of Connecticut. And most customers are very stressed over their long-distance move. And most often it has to do with a job change. And, you've moved several times. You got some of the family wants to go and some of the family doesn't want to go and, on and on. But sometimes there's a death or a divorce that's, impacted by the relocation. So our coordinators who were dealing with customers, both electronically and also verbally by phone often because, the long distance nature of it, if we picked up on it, our coordinator, we allowed them they had the authority to offer to the customer, would they like a chaplain to come to their home and visit with them right there at origin and also at destination. And we had a few that exercised that. We also had a ability for customers to submit prayer requests electronically, and we had a prayer team that prayed over those. But we also are suppliers. To us, a supplier, because we had more business than we could handle, could be a moving company in Los Angeles. And if that employer or the owner of the company had an employee in the hospital, and they were kind of like you were talking about here, was really worried about them, we would offer that if it was okay with them, if we could send a chaplain. So, I saw with my own eyes, you mentioned it earlier, it's just because of our people knowing that we cared not only for them but for our customers and suppliers as well, that we saw, you touched on it a moment ago, productivity in our company increase. People really were seeking out employment at our company. Turnover was low. Attendance was always high. Work injuries were low. You could go on and on and on with the benefits of the byproduct of those kind of just that service.
It's so true. And one of the fundamental points here is that a number of surveys have been taken of the American workforce, and the number is somewhere between 70 and 80% of the 125 million non-government employees who get up on Monday morning and go to work have no one in their life to really talk to, no one who will really listen to them. And people like you and me, I know a little bit about you. You've got a family, you've got a community around you that loves you and cares about you. I have the same. And when I hear that statistic, it's almost a preposterous thought. But yet the reality is so many people really don't have anybody. A lot of people will go home after work today and not be greeted by a caring spouse who's interested in what their day was all about or what they have just gone through. And so people live very solitary lives, very lonely lives. And so they go back to work the next morning and they take that loneliness into the workplace, and they're dealing with certain issues as high as a small malady of the moment or a long-term illness that had been diagnosed, and there's nobody to talk to. And then the chaplain shows up and says, "How are you doing?
Yeah.
How's your family? Is there anything I can do to encourage you? How can I pray for you?"
Yeah.
And an employee doesn't hear those questions from anyone else in their life in many situations. Not all. But we really are there for those people who we would say have no one.
You made me also think of Gallup, did a massive survey of over 85,000 companies and over 1 million employees. And one of the top items that employees are saying in the survey is to their employer is that, do you care for me?
Mm-hmm.
Do you care for me as an individual? And you really kind of touched on, and it's what's fascinating is only 33% of the companies are really engaging their employees. So in other words, there's 67% of the companies have employees that go to work every day that's either disengaged are not engaged. Not engaged would be like when they go to work, it's like, nah, 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 nah. It's just the same old thing. Disengaged is going to be there, even walking the hallways speaking badly about the boss and the company and, those kind of things. So,
and we're even dealing with a culture right now that is becoming more independent, working at home, working at remote sites, pretty much working in isolation. And so we're even targeting those people with a program we call Connect Care. So while our chaplains will go into a workplace and do a worksite visit, getting to know the employees that work in that office or in that plant or in that place, there are those that are independent and isolated. And we're doing everything we can to stay in contact with them as well so they don't feel that abandonment and so very much alone in their work life.
Yeah. Well, I saw with my own eyes, in human resource terms, they use that term called discretionary effort that took place in our company. And, to me, it's like in the Bible talking about the cheerful giver, giving. I saw employees constantly giving over and above what was required of them. And Doug, you probably know that, from a human resource aspect, that's like finding the goose that lays the golden egg, because the impact it has on the bottom line of the organization. One of the things that I'm sure you're often asked is this legal? Do you mind addressing that a little bit?
Well, it's absolutely legal. In fact, I was not long ago with the chief chaplain of the Air Force for our armed forces. And he made a brilliant observation. He said, there are 5 aspects of every individual. There's the physical, there's the mental, there's the emotional, there's the social, and there's the spiritual. And he said companies are doing many things to address all 5 of those issues. So for the physical, they may have a workout room, they have health care. For the mental, they have training programs and ongoing education. For the emotional, they may have counseling services and wellness kinds of programs. For the social, they got everything from a ball team to all kinds of office gatherings and parties and that sort of thing. But he said very few companies are doing anything to address the social, which is still an aspect of every individual, and you can't take that away. And he said that's where the chaplains come in. And then he said something very interesting. He said of those 5 areas of our lives, of those 5 areas, only one area is protected by an amendment to our Constitution. That First Amendment, the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom that we have in this marvelous nation to be able to talk to people about their spiritual life. And everybody has some kind of a spiritual life by pure, raw definition. Take away some of the religiosity of that. And we do that as chaplains. We take away the religiosity. And we're able to talk to people in all areas of their lives. And people don't know how to do that because they're not familiar with that. And they're not well versed in that, especially those 70% who have no one in their life. And the chaplain is able and trained and skilled to be able to help a person understand that there is a God who loves them and cares about them, and that there are answers to the hope that people have within them.
You and I have a good friend. His name's Kelly Shackelford, First Liberty Organization, and I've heard Kelly bring this up before, and I'm speaking in a layman's way of not from a legal aspect, because
Sure.
their organization represents people from a legal aspect, but this is basically what my takeaway has been is that, as the employer, just like you mentioned, the First Amendment. But also there is federal law that was brought in, by Congress in the 1960s that pretty well, as the employer, we can pretty well do just about anything we want to do in this area.
That's right.
The exception, in other words, let me go back on this, is that I can spend my money on anything I want to spend the company's money on. I can do just about anything I want to do in the organization. But the exception is I cannot require somebody to attend Bible study or to even talk to a chaplain. I can't require it. It has to be a volunteer. And so it's an oversimplification of what the legality of all of this.
And our chaplains, their goal is to go in and build an open, trusting relationship with employees. But conversations need to be employee-driven. They need to be initiated by the employee, and the chaplain is able to respond to their inquiry, to their questions, to their needs. So when an employee says, would you pray for me? The chaplain can respond well to that. But it's only in a very trusted relationship that a chaplain might say, well, how can I pray for you? He knows that that's a safe question. That's an inbound question. But you're absolutely right. An employer cannot require an individual to even talk to a chaplain. And we've had that situation. I recently was talking to a chaplain, and he said, hey, Doug, I got some really good news. I said, what's that? He said, an employee talked to me today. And I said, well, what's so unusual or good news about that? He said, I've been walking through that office area for 8 years, and that employee would never even look at me, greet me, smile, wouldn't even look up when I came by and said hello. And he said, finally, the employee learned from other employees that I was safe, that I could provide some hope and help. And he said, Chaplain, may I talk to you? And of course, the chaplain was more than willing and ready. And within about an hour, that employee just downloaded a whole life of pain.
Wow.
And finally found someone they could trust.
Yeah.
So sometimes it just takes time.
Yeah.
But it is employee driven.
Yeah. And one thing that was very clear in our company, our employees very well knew that they could stop their work for what they were doing, and they could have the freedom to talk to the chaplain. And the chaplain, and of course, when I sold the company in 2011, we had 4 chaplains, but the chaplains they knew that they could interrupt somebody and just say how things going today. They knew they had the freedom to do that as well because of the kind of culture we had in our organization. And so one other thing, if I might mention about on the legal side, is that it has to do with the accommodation of the employee. That if an employee, for example, in the workstation would like to put up a cross and maybe a picture of Jesus in their workstation, is that as the employer, I'm required by law to accommodate that employee to be able to do those kind of things as well. So going back to, is this legal, is that, there is a lot of opportunity here that a lot of people don't even realize.
Yeah.
And so, Doug, this has been a great conversation. I'm so appreciative of the years of Marketplace Chaplains service to my own company before I sold it. And it's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit more since you're you're the new chief on as the president and CEO of Marketplace Chaplains, and we really appreciate you being here today, and thank you for this time.
Thank you, Bobby. It's been a great conversation.
You're listening to RNCN, the digital destination for premium talk radio.